Good morning to all of you out there. Welcome to the program agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran, thanking you for joining us this morning. It's a Wednesday. It's a bit overcast out there. I'm here in Barrio Capitolio, Pasig City, for my friends who mistakenly presumed I retired a long time ago and have decided to live in Batangas. Sorry to disappoint you, but I am here in Manila, in Pasig, and to kind of make my presence felt in your lives, okay? Because there are people who are saying, "Oh, what are you doing here in Manila? I thought you were retired already." Nope. Sorry to disappoint those who think I have doing the Rip Van Winkle journey. I am wide awake here on Cignal TV, channels 8 and 250. Thank you to our subscribers as well as to our viewers on Facebook and on YouTube. Today, we will start our day with this daily starter. I believe it came from one of those American pastors I listened to, but my memory is so mixed up, I can't accurately say who it was. But the line is, so many mistakes are rooted in ego. If you are a businessman, if you are a leader in your community, even a family head of family, excuse me, whether you're the father, the mother, etc., and just regular folks, many mistakes in life are generally caused by ego, by pride. And please always, if you can, post this simple message on your screen, on your board. If you are the type who has to make many decisions, especially decisions affecting your family or your employees, because there is nothing wrong in being humble. There is nothing wrong in consulting people. And especially, there is nothing wrong in asking yourself, am I thinking this way? Or am I going to make this decision because my ego won't let me do something else? Don't hurt yourself and don't hurt the people around you by making an ego-driven mistake. Okay, let's now go to the front page of the Philippine Star. And September 14, 2022, the headline is, BBM wants estate tax final settlement. President Bongbong Marcos, speaking at an event, has said that he wants this tax case against his family reopened because they never really had the chance to defend themselves, because while the case was ongoing, they were in exile because they were run out of the country back then, and they couldn't go back because they were, according to the news item, prisoners in a United States Air Force base. Okay, however, former Associate Justice Carpio has reiterated time and again that the matter has been settled, has been judged by no less than the Supreme Court. It is final and executory. So ang paglalabanan, the only thing to squabble about are the penalties incurred by delays, etc. Okay, at the top of the front page, the House of Representatives has approved the postponement of the barangay and the Sangguniang Kabataan polls, which will cost us reportedly 5 billion pesos for not doing it, aside from the fact that according to some experts, it is a violation of the Constitution, if not laws of the land. Okay, so that's a lesson to all of you. He who writes the laws makes the rules. Okay, and the top photo of the front page, a rather sad photo of the funeral procession of the late Queen of England, and that photo was taken on the procession of Queen Elizabeth's coffin from the Palace of Holyrood House to St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh in Scotland. And if I'm not mistaken, the remains of the late Queen will be flown to London for a 4-day vigil. But please check the proper pages on Facebook or internet for the actual schedule if you want to monitor that on the international news channels. Okay. EO suspends annual amortization for car plants. Okay, the president yesterday approved a year-long moratorium on annual amortization and interest payments for lands distributed under the Agrarian Reform Program in a move aimed at allowing farmers to focus on their productivity. Meanwhile, President Marcos has also said that new franchise for ABS-CBN is still possible once issues raised during the hearings of the House of Representatives are resolved. Okay, ironically, the statement came out from an interview on a program from the newest channel, All TV, which for all intents and purposes replaced ABS-CBN. Okay, now let's go to the other news. What's non-crowded clarification on masking? So, okay, the League of Provinces of the Philippines chairman and Quirino Governor Daquila Carlo Cua said the DOH should put in detail the definition of non-crowded, open, and well-ventilated areas. Okay, Malacanang, for my part, Malacanang and the DOH should also get their statements aligned, because Malacanang said that they highly encourage senior citizens and people with comorbidities to wear masks. The DOH, on the other hand, said that senior citizens and people with comorbidities are not covered by the exemption from mask wearing in public. In other words, they must wear masks. So that's the sort of thing that happens when too many people are talking or being asked. Okay, meanwhile, NTC to telcos, block text scam links. Okay, the National Telecommunications Commission is beginning to feel public pressure because there is now a post on social media where it says the NTC was able to block a multi-million agreement between two networks, able to take away the franchise of a giant network, but can't block the scams through the telco. So ayan, medyo na pressure na yata sila, gumagalaw na sila. Meanwhile, the Bangko Sentral, in coordination partnership with retailers, has launched its coin deposit machine project, where the public can bring their coins, mga barya, and deposit it to this coin deposit machines, and they can get credits, e-credits, or get vouchers for shopping in the participating malls. Okay. And finally, Succession and Squid Game are top Emmy winners. Okay. Lee Jung-jae, winner of the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a drama series for Squid Game, poses with his trophy. Okay, there you go. That's our wrap-up of the news in the Philippine Star front page for today. Now, yesterday, while I was standing in front of my gate, checking out a car that was passing by, because it was a very attractive car, and it was a car I've always had an eye for because of its styling. I was reminded of my friend. And you might say, huh? How does a car remind you of your friend? It was a Mazda. It was a Mazda 2, just coincidentally passing by my house yesterday morning. And I said, I just spoke to the boss of Mazda Philippines the other night, last Saturday. He promised he would come on the show. So we kind of rattled his cage yesterday and got him to join us this morning just for a catch up conversation. And let's introduce our first guest for this morning.
Steven Tan is the president and CEO of Mazda Philippines for a decade now. But before this, the Malaysian expat shared his expertise and skills at Ford, both here in the Philippines and Thailand.
Okay, good morning, my friend. And have you managed to adjust to the time zone? Because you travel so much that I'm sure you have about 3 body clocks already.
Yeah. Good morning, Cito. And I wasn't expecting to get a call from you this soon. So when the call came yesterday, I said, yeah, why not? Because the option was tomorrow, and tomorrow, as we know, is the Philippines International Motor Show, and they open at 10. So I couldn't make it as much as I want to. So I said, why don't we do it this morning? So thank you for that. I have not fully recovered. It's a little harder coming in than to go out. It normally takes about 4 or 5 days. So I'm getting better, Cito. Thank you.
Okay, you've worked for a number of brands, but before that, I do know you are from Malaysia. Which part of Malaysia do you come from?
I was born in Kuala Lumpur, or in a suburb of Kuala Lumpur, place called PJ. So I was born there. And when we were living with my grandparents, and it's a very traditional way of doing that. And when the kids grow up, they go back and they moved out, and so we moved to Kuala Lumpur. So I grew up there.
Okay, and what would you call your circumstance in Kuala Lumpur? Were you upper class, middle class? Because I saw in your resume that you actually went to Duke University in the United States. So one would assume, hey, this guy must have come from a rich family in Malaysia.
Oh, to the contrary, Cito. I wouldn't say we're not poor, but we are definitely not middle class. We are lower middle class.
Mm-hmm.
We are third generation, immigrants from China. So my dad was born in Kuala Lumpur too. But as we grew up, when I was 15, it's of some background is that when you mentioned a queen, then maybe in that context, Malaysia is a Commonwealth country.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are considered, growing up, we are considered Commonwealth citizens, so to speak. And when I was 15, I asked my parents and I said, I'd like to go to Canada. And education was free. There was an obligation of Commonwealth country to educate each other, especially development. So I went to Canada, and I went to high school. And then I went to Toronto. And we were international students, but you pay a privilege fee, and I finished school. Duke is interesting because Duke was sponsored by the company. I used to work for Ford Motor Company, and they have executive programs. So I ended up a little bit of time in Duke, and that was a really good experience.
Okay.
No, I did not come from a privileged family.
Okay, but now where does the connection come with vehicles or with automotive, with the automotive industry? Because your marketing management, you're the second guy I interviewed this week who was in one area of discipline and spent the rest of his life in motoring, and I'm like, where do these guys come get off?
That is life, right? A lot of the time, life is like this. I went to school, and I chose economics. That was closest to what I do now, economics and computer science. In fact, the things that I loved growing up was one of my passion is, it might sound a little geeky, but math and physics and chemistry were my favorite subject. And so I finished school with computer science and economics. Economics because it's an elective and it's useful to do. And I've never had a career based on, let's say, computer science. But I would say that the engineering and computer science, they're very much engineering, is very useful part of, I would say, career. And I have a special connection with engineers.
Mm-hmm.
I find that they are, even marketing people, engineers. There are a lot of engineers in marketing. And I find it easier to relate to them, and you get to solution much faster because, we've all brought up to be educated, to be logical and follow right brain.
Okay, now, was your first job out of college already in motoring, or was there something else?
No, far from it, Chito. I finished school, and Asia was in the grip of the financial crisis when I finished school. And so I didn't have a job. I finished school, and I didn't stay in Canada, and I came back, and I didn't have a job for quite a long time. So I did odd jobs. And you don't choose odd jobs. You just happen to have odd jobs, right?
Okay.
And, yeah. And I went to work for my uncle. He has a little shop that he formulates chemicals. He sells them to industrial, so things like lubricants, detergents and stuff. So I went door to door, or door to door, as in like not door to door, but factory to factory, trying to sell stuff. And I think, we always think back and said, what made you who you are and how you learn your things. I think those were the formative years of having to make cold calls, door to door, convince people to buy something that, frankly, they don't really need that, So those kind of right? Who needs a guy to come into that and tell them to buy something that, like, okay. So a lot of time you just develop. I would call it empathy, relationship, getting people on your side. Those are useful skills in life, right?
I mean, selling, let's use the term loosely, door to door. That entails a mountain of rejections. I'll be honest with you. I don't take rejection kindly. Okay. Now, how about you? What did all that rejection do to you, to your ego, to your mind, or to your lifestyle?
It's hard. You never get used to it, Chito. You never get used to rejection. But what it does one thing though. It does get you to understand what's on the other side. I think that part of it is invaluable because I wouldn't call it a skill, that to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoe on the other side and to reject you. It's I would say the best word call is a humble experience. It makes you modest. You don't take things for granted. It never really worked out, right? And if you get a paycheck, and there was like very little money, you get a paycheck for, if you win 2 or 3 times a month, and that would be considered pretty successful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you develop a philosophy or a strategy to deal with this? Because some people, if you reject them, they keep coming back. And there are people who just like, oh, go to hell.
Yeah, it's tough. And until this day, when I come up with people who are their job is to sell whatever, right? We're talking about insurance, investment package, and I will listen to them. I would spend time with them to listen. It's not that I will buy in, but I know that just listening to them gives them the respect for their for what they do, right? But I've never bought an insurance policy, but I just listen to them. Right?
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are watching this program and making a list of my guests as potential buyers, candidates for insurance program, Stephen is not your client. Okay, but okay, what are your other odd jobs? So going door to door, factory level or office level to sell chemicals. What are the other jobs? Because I did a very short stint of janitorial work at one point in the U.S. I've done construction in the U.S. I've built resorts. I've done advertising, marketing, promotions, ran an agency, etc. But it's like, what about you?
Kind of the story of my life too, right, Chito? It's not unusual, and in fact, it's quite typical. And my dad had a friend who has an architecture firm, and he said, "Why don't you go work for him?" So I spent 2 years first on the drafting table, learning how to draw straight lines. And that's yeah. So straight lines are not easy to draw, right? Let me put out there. So I spent a year doing that, drafting, and I really enjoyed myself. I learned a lot about construction planning because he also owns development. So I spent another year on site. Right? So I would go to the site, I would look at the progress, I would check the progress of, and these are very large residential project that I was assigned to. I'm not like the head of thing. I'm just a we call us coolie, right? Coolie are the people who goes on site and they like go do this and go do that. Look at
Yeah, like
things.
a gopher. Go for
Yeah,
this,
like a
go for
gopher.
that.
Yeah, so that was great. I spent a couple of years in selling door to door, 2 years in construction and architecture, and finally I got a break. Friend called up and said, "Hey, I'm quitting my job in a bank. Do you want to have a shot?" And so I went for the interview, and I got a job in a bank, and that was like my first real job when I was 25.
And how long did you last?
Oh, it lasted quite a while, and from there on, I made sure that I spent time learning the craft or the trade in a particular job, and I spent 4 years in a bank doing maybe 2 or 3 different jobs. I went in one morning and I said, "This is my first real job." I didn't know the job was big. Or I had to run a department of 52 people, and that I thought was incredibly lucky for me to learn management. How do you manage people?
Well, exactly, because I mean, the little that I know of Malaysians from my Malaysian friends is that you guys, as a people and culture, you're very exacting. You, I think, would be the equivalent of Swiss people in Europe. You would be the Swiss people of Asia. Very exacting. You have high standards, and how does a guy go in and first job runs a department?
Yeah, I had no idea. I wasn't given a heads up. I walked in and this was the nerves, the hub of the bank that serves everybody else. Like if somebody wants a paper clip, they come here. We take out the trash. We run the office. And then eventually I got to know, I worked for the CEO because he said, we're going to expand, we're going to do an expansion. I want you to be in charge of expansion. So for the last part of my career in the bank, I was traveling to East Malaysia, very small planes, looking at properties, setting up the bank systems and stuff. I think all these things, you learn your craft, make you who you are. It is, I think, to some extent, Cito, I think that part of me lives with me when you said you're very exacting. And sometimes people get a little, I would say, confused. They say, "Wow, Stephen, you're a nice guy. You're reasonable. You listen to things, but you are rigid. Like you will not compromise. This is how we do things, and this is where we got to go." And I think that's important. That if you want a certain outcome, you got to stick with certain principles.
Set the standards and go for them, and don't compromise.
Yeah, and not to compromise to the extent where it's sensible and it can work out. I think.
Okay, but what's the how do you call the backside to that, or what's the price when people are very exacting and uncompromising, following the standards?
It's very rewarding. I think it's very rewarding for the people that I work with, the people who work with me. And I don't mean employees or stuff, but we collabs and we have a lot of association with other people. Like, for example, one example would be that recently, about a year ago, we went to collaboration with the Manila Sports Car Club in starting up this race series called the Spec Series. Cito, you've been around for a long, long time. Racing is a very granular, gray kind of a activities, right? Lots of
Yeah.
compromise and stuff. And I think what I will bring into this will be when I work with the sports car club and the people in there that says, no, I think if we set a standard, we need to be professional, seen as trustworthy, that we can be trusted to run a race that has a great outcome. Then we have to follow the rules. The rules are meant to be followed, not to be bent. And I'm no surprise that there are people who think that you can bend the rules. It's just a matter of who you know.
Okay. I guess that's why we enjoy each other's company, because you set the rules and I break the rules. Be careful. Don't drink your coffee when I'm talking. Well, yeah, I don't want you to spray the
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, but you grew up in Asia and a lot of parts of the world, you face the same issue. But it's been very rewarding. It's rewarding in that people people that like to work with you, that people like to have long-term relationship with you in terms of working together, because they can rely on you because they know who you are.
Okay, motoring is the auto industry is a multiracial, multicultural setting. Now, what has your experience been like? What is the reception like? Because for the longest time, it was either an American-dominated industry, and then it became an American, Japanese, and then it became American, Japanese, Korean, and now it's less American, more Japanese, more Korean, and now increasingly even more Chinese. And then here comes this Malaysian running the company, and I'm like, did you bump into heads or into obstacles? What was that experience like, racially or culturally?
Yeah, I think my feelings is, Cito, I don't bring a culture into my job, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been very lucky. I started my career in automotive in Ford Motor Company. And although it's an American company, Ford really is no longer an American company. It is a multinational company, and they really are. And some of the colleagues that my former colleagues I work with, that majority of them are non-American. I did spend some time in the US as part of the training, but they were Australia, Britain, and for some time until recently, maybe at least 15 years ago, Ford company is like an Australian company, a UK company, American company, and sometimes a Japanese company. And I work with all of them, and that I learned multicultural. Plus, in my job in Ford, I was working from Thailand, and that was a kind of an Asia Pacific job, and you learn to manage culture, biases, how people think in that way. So you tend to then understand and stay away from stereotyping that certain culture make decisions a certain way, and that's true. And it's not because they want to, and because it's the cultural band that makes them make decisions that way. So when I come in here, when I accepted a job to come in here, I bring with me some clarity in terms of how to run a company, to the way that would serve the stakeholders, right? The stakeholders, by stakeholder, I mean is, it's not always means the customer. Stakeholders meant many things that you can employ. And the last 10 years that I think you mentioned that, yeah, we've been operating for 10 years now, and the 10 years has been incredibly rewarding. You never stop learning. That's always true. So I don't see people think of me like I bring Malaysian in, because there's no business way of doing Malaysian way of doing business the Malaysian way. And it that isn't. It's just Malaysia is. I'm lucky also. Malaysia is a very multicultural upbringing. Basically of Malay, Chinese, Indian, European kind of a background. Very similar to the Philippines.
Okay, we'll go for a quick break, and when we return, more of this. I'm curious to know what does Thailand do correctly where the Philippines missed the boat, because historically the Philippines and Thailand were, like twins. We were growing together. Our monies were of the same value. Our products were of the same level, etc. In fact, many Filipinos would even claim that, hey, we were the big brother to Thailand. And then suddenly we are the missing relative in the Asian group because we just kind of left behind. So I'd like to ask you about those things. We'll go for a quick break. We'll be right back here on Agenda.
Sure.
Welcome back to the program Agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran. And with us today is the president and CEO of Mazda Philippines, Steven Tan, who is also a friend in the motoring industry. Steven, you mentioned that you'd done odd jobs. You did commercial door-to-door sales of chemicals. You worked in a bank for, was that 4 years, you said? And then, but how did you get into motoring?
Motoring. After my bank job, I've always been attracted to this field called marketing communication. And, one of the places that you can go to and get a institutional learning is you go to an advertising agency. Mm-hmm. So I spent a year knocking on the door of like Burnett, most of the multinational, and I ended with, and I was it was quite frustrating, Chito. One of the things about one of the character and policy about advertising agencies, which I would say maybe I dislike the policy, is that you have to have experience. So I went up to the MD. Her name was Jennifer Chan of J. Walter Thompson. They no longer exist, by the way. And I said, hey, Jennifer, let me be blunt with you. You are like my last stop, because if I get rejected this time, I'm going to go back to the bank. And I said, Jennifer, how would one get an experience if you're only looking for experienced people? It doesn't make sense, right?
I love that statement because that is the outcry of so many fresh graduates.
True, right? And I was
Yeah.
so frustrated that I went to all the agencies, like McCann Erickson, and I said, when is and if you give me a break, then I can get experience and I can contribute. And she took, and I, to her credit, she was the only one who took a break. And I said, the bank don't pay very much, but I'll work for peanuts. I'll just want to come in, spend some time in here. And that maybe Cito is one of the greatest journey experience of my lifetime in the 4 years in J. Walter Thompson, which, I was quite proud to say that in my time there, the revenue for the agency, we were ranked 6th. By the time I left, we were number 1.
But were you still single back then? Because, when monkeys get peanuts, but I don't know if your wife was gonna. Were you married already? Not yet.
No, the marriage, either the marriage won't survive it, or that you'll never find anybody. If you work, when I was working at the bank, I working at agency, you never stop working. You have no life. You had no life, and I had an incredible client like Citibank, Shell. I had very good client like Malaysian Airlines too, and my final client, to your question is, my final client, where I went back to this Jennifer, and I spent 2 years just pitching, and I find that one of the things that I like very much to do, I like to do business pitches. That was my background. I will put a case together, I will find out the category, and I will go to the client and I said, you asked us for pitch, I'm going to pitch here. So I was quite proud that my pitch success was 100%, that every time we pitch, we win a business.
Mm-hmm.
And the last pitch we did was pretty nasty. It was to a company called Ford Motor Company.
Ford Motor Company.
Yeah. So
very ambitious.
Yeah. The backstory is that J. Walter Thompson, as the advertising agency, had a 57-year relationship with Ford Motor Company in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So they grew up together, like Henry Ford, J. Walter. That was like the de facto. And J. Walter and Ford was such a large account for J. Walter that they account for at least 50% of the global revenue. So that's how big they were. But in Malaysia, in the Ford account was with another agency called Leo Burnett. And I thought, that's strange. Burnett is a competitor. So we went to the US and I corresponded and I said, we should get J. Walter in. And they said, yeah. So they sent in 2 executives from Detroit over to do the pitch. But the local client obviously don't want me. But we pitch anyway and we won the account. And after that, I looked after the business for 6 months and I found that the client really didn't like me. And I left. I literally left the agency up from there on.
They didn't like you?
They didn't like me because they liked the other agency better than us. They were being forced to accept.
Okay.
They were being forced to, and they were being forced to by the region. And so I thought maybe that was unfair, all right, on both sides, that we were being put together in a marriage that nobody wanted. So I literally left. And there was time then I left, and that was the beginning of the .com era. And I went out there to make a stick of it, which I got to tell you, I didn't make it, right? I left, I didn't make it. So there's a lot of nice stories about people go to .com, made it big. I was one of those who didn't make it. But also, the Ford company in Malaysia had a change of management and they went out to look for somebody to run marketing. And they came to me and I said, would you come back and now be in that company? So I did. And that was...
Was that because you had the reputation in marketing, or was that because you're the type who's so good at creating networks?
I think I made an impression on the head of the client, which not the operational head. There was another group that looked after the distribution, and he came to me and says, we restructure, the old management is no more, and would you come in to make up the new management? And I couldn't say no. So I left my other .com company, and I told my partner, I said, I'm very sorry, I'm going to take a break from here and going to pursue a dream of mine, which is automotive. And I've never looked back. Cito. That was 1990.
Why do you say it was your dream, Stephen? Because I love to restore cars, although I retired from that ever since COVID started. I already retired from restoring cars. But what was the attraction for you?
I love cars since I was 16. I learned driving when I was 14. The illegal age of driving was 18 at then, but I would take my dad's car out without permission.
Welcome to the club. My first day I did that. I rammed through a concrete wall.
Yeah, my mom. My mom. God bless her. So my mom tells people, I don't know how my son survived his teens and early because he crashed the car and I don't know how he survived that era. But I've always loved cars and I do rallies. And I would spend all my money on that. I will go broke and I stopped rallying. People say, why do you stop rallying? This is such a great sport. I say, well, you run out of money. That's why you stop.
Okay, now what was your discovery in terms of doing the marketing for Ford Malaysia? Because is selling cars the same as selling chemicals or running a bank, or what was it like?
It was incredibly liberating, Cito. There are a couple of things about career which is true, and I make it like a story. And I said, what are the best things to do about selling? I said, money, which is bank, right? Ideas, which are in advertising. You're basically selling ideas. Or money. Money is not a commodity. Money is something that, it's not real. It's just something you trade in. And cars is real, but it's also a passion point. A lot of people talk about cars, and cars are not just a piece of machine. Like we know here, I think Philippines is a great example, Cito, about when cars are not really cars. Cars are dreams. And so you're selling dreams, right?
Okay.
Yeah. You're selling dreams. And in Malaysia, it's such a protected industry where anybody who knows Malaysia know that they have not only just one national car program, they have two national car programs. And because of the government policy. And that was a time where most everybody who wants a car, own a car, buy a car would end up with either one of those national cars because all the other cars would just sit out of reach. And so you would think that companies like Toyota, Honda, Ford is big, but they're actually really small because they're out of reach. And also my entry into Ford was kind of rocky. I went in 97. A month later, there was the global financial crisis. And I thought, man, I'm going to lose my job. Like the entire global market went into recession in 97. And I ended up with lots of trucks, like thousands of trucks on my hand that says, go sell those things. And creativity helps coming from either a bank or advertising. The creative helps and says, what does a consumer want? And I ended up with a really nice career. And then the company was happy enough to say, okay, we're going to send you off to Thailand now and see what you can do. And that's where I started my international.
So in other words, your life or your career path or your the way work jobs lined up, all also lined up for the next job. You were door to door, you were in a bank, you were in an ad agency, and now you're in a car industry, and all your history became critical for one of probably the worst periods for any marketing executive in Asia. Now, you end up in Thailand, and because we might run out of time, I have to ask this question first.
Sure.
What did Thailand do, or what did you see in Thailand that explains their success in the auto industry, where we in the Philippines failed?
Lots of lessons here. Incredibly well lessons here. In my time, I spent 10 years in Thailand, Cito, and I saw the development then. I was in Thailand in the year 2000, and they've been quite successful by then, but it wasn't too late for everybody else. Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand are the three most successful, I guess, government that administration who grew an automotive industry. Thailand being the most successful because they developed a very clear policy and a strategy right from the beginning, right? Like all things, policies of infrastructure and business have to be long-term and not dependent on current administration. Thailand had a benefit of very clear and stubborn strategy, and the strategy worked well because they knew it so well. And they said, well, we are a country of pickup trucks. Let's build our country based on pickup trucks. So very clear, very focused. Not anything else, just pickup trucks. The second thing they knew was that who are the biggest pickup truck manufacturer? The Japanese. Not American, but Japanese. And we're talking about Toyota, Mitsubishi, and they were the biggest thing. What does the Japanese manufacturer do? When they come in, they bring in the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
They all do that. And so in one very quick move over a period of maybe 10 years, they monopolize. So because these are multi-billion-dollar investment, if somebody like Toyota comes in and spends $3 billion in a country, they're not going to move away from that. And to the point where they've been so successful in their, and labor was plentiful. The parallel between Philippines and Thailand will not escape you. Both Philippines and Thailand share about the same kind of economic structure, labor. I would say that, Cito, are completely honest. Philippines is far more advanced than any countries in Southeast Asia. Then and now, right? In terms of being able to converse, language skills, learning, literacy, I don't think Thailand was that far advanced than us. I think, in fact, far behind. But they had very clear policies, and they captured investment in the same way that Vietnam is doing that now, in the same way that Indonesia is doing now. And I thought, we may have lost. I think we've already lost that opportunity. Unfortunately, I wish it was.
We've been left far too behind. I mean, the fact that yesterday there was already a pronouncement that there's a yellow alert or a rotational brownouts expected, etc., already tells us that even if we wanted to, or even if the foreign companies came to town, they couldn't set up shop because we don't have the infrastructure to support the investors, not in terms of roadways, power supply, etc., and even less in terms of policy. So thank you for answering that question. Were there any other high points that you noticed that, or perhaps as pivots that the Philippines can do that you saw in Malaysia and in Thailand?
Well, Thailand did that very well, and they not only do they continue the successes. They started to pick up trucks, and like 10 years ago, they said, well, we need another something else. So they went into another program called the Eco Car. Less successful than the pickup truck, but they had a plan because they knew that you can't stake your future on one success story because it will change, right? I would say Malaysia had the benefit of a very long-reigning prime minister called Dr. Mahathir. I mean, he was there for 25 years, and he could realize the vision and the dream that he wanted to happen, right? And that's one of those things that is different from Malaysia, is that there's somebody in there who saw entire program or economic program through right to the end, and he's still there, and he's still influential. So that's Malaysia. And he says, we will have our own auto car program. Now, there's a lot of critics around it, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not. He did pull it through, and it protected the industry and kind of fenced it in. Philippines, we don't have such a big fence, so you could argue that that's better or that's. I think Philippines is probably the only automotive economy in Southeast Asia that has very low barrier. That means anybody who wanted to can jump over the fence and come in.
Mhm.
China, for example, right?
Mhm.
You won't see the same level of Chinese penetration, let's say Indonesia or Malaysia or Thailand or Vietnam, because the fence are much higher. That if you want to come in, you have to do a certain things.
You have to
Invest,
make the investments.
you have to make the investment. And Indonesian and Vietnam being the most, I guess, highest fence. Indonesia, in fact, not only automotive, but a lot of industry that if you don't invest in my country, you're not going to come in.
You can't sell your products if you don't manufacture it in our neighborhood.
Yeah, case in point where, they recent 15 years ago, BlackBerry was the most successful telco equipment in Indonesia.
Mhm.
Nobody knows BlackBerry now. They were the most successful. And they were literally asked to leave because if you want to operate here, you better invest here because BlackBerry made the decision to invest manufacturing in Singapore. And that is why they had to leave.
Okay. Now, I think I better ask you to talk about Mazda because that's what triggered today's interview. There was this Mazda 2 passing in front of me, and I'm like, I always liked that car. It's a very simple but sleek design, etc. What's the situation with Mazda now that you're on the seat? What's the plan for Mazda here in the Philippines in terms of models, in terms of marketing?
Mazda is Mazda is a brand that is sometimes elusive to people. It takes some time to understand Mazda, and I say elusive. It's because it's a very small Japanese automotive company, and people will say there is no place economically, even for myself when I work in Ford, it says there is no place in the world for small automotive company because scale, it's the game.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have the scale, you can't invest. But then when I was here, when I was assigned here in 2008, something happened, Cito, right? I don't talk about that much. Something happened in 2008. The company downsized, and Ford Motor Company in Philippines has the Mazda franchise. And so in 2008, while we were downsizing, we couldn't afford to keep everybody. And so my boss then was Rick Baker. He said, Steve, what are we going to do? I said, Rick, we don't really have any choice or options. We have to combine and merge those two organizations together. And that was how I got to know Mazda better, although I had responsibility for Mazda in Thailand too.
Mm-hmm.
But I got even more involved in Mazda, and I found Mazda very attractive. They have a certain way of doing things. And when I left, I went back to Thailand, Mazda came and says, globally, we're separating, right? It was not just Philippines. Would you like to come back and start up the company again? I jumped at it and I came in here. And so your question is that, what's the future for Mazda? Mazda is constantly evolving. When I was in a meeting with the Mazda executive in Penang in 2017 or 18, they said, we're going to pivot. We're going to pivot to, they call premium, right? It's also very difficult to describe premium. What does premium mean, right? It means different things to different people. But they said premium. And I quickly understood what they were talking about, because if you don't have scale, you must go somewhere else. You must find another way to do things. And that's where that next journey started from there. And it says premium means vehicle that has better content in technology, high quality, better material, nice to drive. In short, Cito, Mazda has to appeal to a certain customer profile and not be everything to everybody, because everything to everybody has already been there. Like, for example, a lot of the Japanese brands now have become everything to everybody. And when you have Chinese products coming in with low tariff or Korean product coming with low tariff, you're going to get destroyed if you don't have a different strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because Yeah, so we have to elevate. Well, the word is elevate or go premium and become something else. And I think to some extent that journey has started. We are getting there. It'll never stop. And today we have a different customer profile from anybody else. And people said, words like Mazda is premium to other Japanese, for example, right? I don't claim it to be factual or true, but it's just words from people. Better design, better product, much more technology, or more expensive. And that's Mazda. That's where Mazda has to be, and it will continue to be there.
Okay, it's not. In other words, it's not. It's not your mass market kind of product or brand. It has the elegance, but it comes with the price. Not excessive. Not excessive in its range, but it's not cheap either. Now, for those who, let me rephrase that. Would it be right to say Mazda is underrated or not fully appreciated because you haven't really gone out and been making so much noise as the marketing guru from Malaysia? But it's like, hey, we got a product, we've got the team, and let people discover this on their own.
I attended for about an hour, 2 hours in the management Association Philippines MAP. They had a conference in Shang, and for the first time I went in for a meeting. It's an annual meeting, and I was sitting next to this lady, right? I won't say her name, and I give her my card, right? Everybody does that, and she said, "Oh, Mazda." She turns to me and whispered, "You know what? Mazda is underrated." She said exactly the same thing you did, and she said that, and I felt. Instead of feeling that, oh, I'm not doing my job, I felt quite pleased about that because I'd rather be underrated than be overrated.
Yeah. I mean, but is that a tactic? Because it's like, Stephen, I mean, your products are nice, but why are you kind of, toning it down? Now, is it intentional or what?
It's intentional that you don't, I mean, people in the public or the press, we don't talk about how many cars we sell. We don't talk about commercial metric is not useful as a measurement for what we do, and I tend to talk about other things that Mazda believes in philosophy. For example, Cito, when we built our facility in Cabuyao, all right, which we invested quite a lot of money in that. But one of the things that is most important to me personally is that facility must be self-sustainable. That means it must not try to take or contribute to global warming or carbon footprint. So it's self-sufficient. That means if there was no more electricity outside coming in, we will still be able to turn on the lights, turn on the air conditioning, right? And if there was no pipe in water, we'll still be okay because we harvest rainwater. So we do our own, and I talk about that, and I said, well, we should all plant trees. We should be self-sufficient. And I think as a country, one of the things that impressed me about Thailand, and I think we can still do it here, is to be self-sufficient in terms of agriculture, feeding ourselves, right? Because in Thailand, I learned from the king, and he said self-sufficiency economy is to him the most important thing, that we don't have to rely on other people to feed us.
Okay. So anyway, last question. The Philippine International Motor Show is going to start tomorrow. Are you guys rolling out all of your models at the event?
Yes, we're all showing a thing, but I'm excited about one particular thing. That one of the things that I enjoy myself the most about Philippines is that we have a very thriving, healthy car club called the Miata Club of Philippines, and they turn 25 this month.
Oh, okay.
So we in Japan built this car to celebrate their 25th anniversary. So it's called a Miata Club Philippines 25th Anniversary Edition, and we're going to unveil it tomorrow at 5 p.m.
Miata Club 25th Anniversary model. Okay, something to look forward to. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm surprised. I'm already over time. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking to you this morning. Have a great day, and all the best for the show for Mazda here in the Philippines.
Thank you, Cito. I enjoyed myself. Thanks very much. I'll see you soon.
Okay, and let's now go to our blessing for the week, ladies and gentlemen. It comes from the book of Haggai, chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. And the Lord said, "The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, declares the Lord Almighty. The glory of this present house will be greater than the glory of the former house, says the Lord Almighty. And in this place I will grant peace, declares the Lord Almighty." May you all have a peaceful day ahead of you. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you learned a lot from our guests, and let's continue to pray for our country. Please keep it here on One News PH.